Hey, it's Philip Vanderboss from Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk, and I'm here in South Carolina with an interesting comparison today. It's a little odd, I'm gonna admit it. So right here we have my 2008 Hummer H3, and I'm gonna compare it to a 2021 Ford Bronco. You might ask, well, why are you gonna compare vehicles that are 13 years apart? It's because I own this vehicle, and I'm thinking about buying one of these. And I think other customers might be in the same boat where they have something like this, and they're saying, okay, well, I wanna get to the modern technology and buy a new Ford Bronco. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna walk around, we're gonna look at the exterior, we're gonna look at the interior, and then we're gonna go for a little bit of drive and compare these two vehicles. And actually, there's a lot more similarities than you might think for vehicles that are 13 years apart, but there's some key differences too. We're gonna get started right now. So let's go ahead and look at the front end first on the exterior, and you can notice some obvious similarities right away. Both of them have a very squared off appearance. Obviously that off-road ruggedness, that's military style that you got with the old Jeeps and the Hummers back in the day, and the Broncos have that, you know, from its heritage as well. So those are some obvious similarities right there, right off the bat. Second thing you have is the round headlights. Both of these vehicles have the round headlights, and then both the vehicles obviously have the tow hooks on the front. It's interesting actually, on the Bronco, we have more tow loops where you can put a shackle in there, and they have a steel bumper on this particular Wildtrack one, whereas on the Hummer H3 we have the loops already have the shackles in them, and actually they're fairly rusted here since I live at the beach. And then we have a plastic bumper on the Hummer. I will note that the Hummer actually came with a chrome grille originally, and I blacked it out using Plastidip, and I actually have a video on that if you are interested in how that process worked. It's been about 5-6 years now, and it's actually starting to look pretty bad, so I might have to do it again. Whereas the Bronco over here has the blacked out grille already to start with from the factory. If you are interested in the white grille, like the Heritage grille, we have a video that shows you the Heritage Bronco, which shows that look, which I think is also pretty damn sharp. On the hood, you'll notice that the Hummer has this little blacked out grille thing here. It's a fake grille. It's not a vent. On some Hummers, you actually used to have those fake helicopter hooks. Either way, they're plastic. They don't work. They're crap. But it's just a little bit of styling on the hood. Whereas over on the Bronco, we actually have the hood graphic. It's the Wildtrack graphic, and it's not trying to be anything other than just a graphic, and it actually is supposed to help you a little bit with glare off your hood when you're driving. So, like I said, squared off looks. You get the squared off hood, you get the squared off roof line, you get the squared off windshields. Both of them have black mirrors currently, because like I said, I blacked out my Hummer H3, so I got rid of most of the chrome on the H3 already to give it a little bit more modern look. And I did leave the steel bumper down there at the bottom, the steel bumper portion with the skid plate there. I will note that both of these are riding on 35-inch tires. And if you go down here, we can see the difference between the 35-inch tires. So on the left, I have put on BF Goodrich KM3 tires, and on the right is the tires that come with the Sasquatch package. It's the 35-inch Goodyear Territory MT mixed mud terrain tires. And you can see the difference on that, the tread there, how much more aggressive the BF Goodrich KM3s are. Much better at grabbing rocks and stuff like that compared to the Goodyears, in my opinion. So there are your tires, and there is your front end styling. One other thing here, I can keep my camera steady enough. So if you look at the widths on the two vehicles, the Hummer on your left is 74.7 inches wide if you don't count the mirrors, and on the right, the Bronco is 75.9 inches wide without the mirrors. So the Bronco is actually a little bit wider. To me, actually the Hummer just looks wider to me. I'm not sure what it is about it, but maybe it has something to do with the height, because the Bronco is 71.9 inches high, while the Hummer is 73.7. Now, of course, that measurement's a little bit off now because I've added the 35-inch tires, and there's a little bit of a lift. So on the left side on the Hummer, I have a 2-inch lift on the front, basically a leveling lift, where I cranked the torsion bars and just leveled out the truck. And the Bronco has its factory 1.2-inch lift all around. It's a Sasquatch lift. So that comes with all the Broncos that have the Sasquatch package. All right, now let's take a look at the powertrains on these two vehicles. As you can see, I have the hoods up, and actually, if you notice on the left, one thing I really love about the Hummer is that the hood opens itself up and holds itself up when you lift it up, just like a tailgate would. Whereas on the right, the Bronco you have to lift it up and then you have to put that prop stick in there. So that's just one little thing I like about the Hummer that I do not see on the Bronco, and it's something I would really miss if I switched to this vehicle. So let's start with the Bronco engine over here. We have this is a Wildtrack package, so we have the 2.7 liter V6 EcoBoost engine, and that is mated to a 10-speed automatic transmission. So this engine produces 330 horsepower at 5250 RPM, and it has 415 pound-foot of torque at 3100 RPM. And the Bronco is capable of towing up to 3,500 pounds, and it has a curb weight of 4,661 pounds. We have an EPA rating on gas mileage for the Bronco at 17 city, 17 highway, and 17 combined. I will tell you though, if you look at my road trip video that I just did this past week, where I went to Overland Expo, I put about 700 miles on this Bronco, and I actually averaged over 18.5 miles per gallon with the Bronco. I think actually on the way home I got 18.9. On the way there I got 18.5. So it's rated for 17, but it seems to do much better than that. So moving over to the Hummer. The Hummer has an inline 5-cylinder engine. This is actually, if you remember back, the Chevy Colorado platform from back in the day, back in the early 2000s. That is the vehicle that, the engine that this one has. So it also had an Alpha version, V8 option, which I would have preferred to purchase, but they're a little hard to get, and actually they're worth a pretty penny these days. So this has the inline 5, 3.7 liter engine. It is mated to a 4-speed automatic transmission, which was optional at the time. And it has a so it produces 242 horsepower at 5,600 RPM and 242 pound-feet of torque at 4,600 RPM. So both those numbers to me is underpowered for the size of this vehicle. The interesting thing though is the curb weight is actually 4,700 pounds. So it's only 39 pounds heavier stock from the factory than the Bronco Wildtrack that you see to your right. So I thought that was pretty interesting how similar the weight is on these two vehicles. And this one is actually rated at towing of 4,500 pounds on the Hummer H3. Okay, so the EPA numbers for gas mileage on the Hummer H3, remember this is a 2008, it was 13 city, 18 highway, and 15 miles per gallon combined. So they're actually 2 miles per gallon combined less than the Ford Bronco. And payload numbers are pretty interesting. Actually, on the Hummer, it's 1,067 pounds of payload, and on the Bronco, 1,101 pounds. So only 35 pounds or so separating the two of these vehicles together on payload. All right, next I want to take a look at a couple of measurements on this vehicle, and as you can see, I have my cheat sheet here to make sure I don't get anything wrong. So first of all, the length on this Hummer H3 is 186.7 inches. The height, like I said, is 73.7. The ground clearance, now these numbers, keep in mind I've upgraded the tires to 35-inch KM3s, like I said. It originally came with 33-inch Bridgestone tires on it, I believe. So we've gotten, like I said, a leveling lift of 2 inches on the front, and we've gained another inch with the tires. But originally the height was 73.7. Originally the ground clearance was about 9.1 inches. So I estimate now we have about 12 inches of ground clearance on this Hummer. The angle of approach, which is also be changed, geometry will be changed with the tires. I don't have a protractor. So the approach angle is 37.5. The departure angle is 35.5. And the wheelbase is 111.9. So, and I also like to note we have 16-inch wheels on this, and these are the chrome wheels that came with it originally. I didn't black those out, just I didn't feel like spraying plastic dip on the chrome. Obviously, I prefer to have black if I could. So let's take a look now at the Bronco, and I'll note that this is the Wildtrack model, which means it has a Sasquatch package. Like I said, it has the 35-inch tires, and it also has a 1.2-inch lift with the Sasquatch package. So on this one, we have a overall length of 189.4, which is just under 2 inches. Oh, I'm sorry, just under 3 inches longer actually than the Hummer H3. The width on it, as I mentioned before, is 75.9, so it's a little bit wider. So the wheelbase on this one is 116.1 inches, so it's just over 4 inches longer in the wheelbase than the Hummer H3. And our ground clearance on this one is 11.5, so it's similar to what I have over there on the Hummer with the lifted and the tires. The approach angle on the front is 43.2. The departure angle is 37. I will note that the Bronco has front and rear lockers and the Hummer H3, which had the off-road package on it when it was purchased, has only the rear locker. And then last thing to note is the 17-inch wheels that come on this Bronco, and like I mentioned, the Hummer had the 60-inch wheels. It's important to know that if you're going to do any off-roading at all, that you always want to get the smaller wheels possible, because it gives you more sidewall. If you want to air down, you've got more room to air down. It gives you a softer ride over the rocks and things like that. If you had like 20, 21-inch wheels like you're seeing on some of these truck packages these days, you don't really have much sidewall to play with. So when you go over rocks and things that are rough, you know, you're going to feel that. You're going to have more chance of a puncture. If you're trying to air it down, like I said, you don't have as much room there to air down and as much cushion. So if you're going off-roading, you want smaller wheels and you don't give a damn what they look like. You want to get them for the off-road performance of the wheels. Move to the rear end, and I'm going to look at a little bit of the sides as well. So the first thing I want you to notice is the color. Over on the Hummer, I forget what they call this, but it's an orange color. Actually, it's a little bit too red for my taste, and one thing that's been holding me back a little bit on the Bronco is actually I'd like to be able to get an orange for the Bronco, but Ford doesn't seem to know what orange is. They have cyber orange, which is really a yellow, and now this year on the Raptor they offer code orange, which is really a red. It's even redder than this. So until they get a proper orange, obviously Jeep, for the folks that know about orange, they've got the pumpkin orange. It's definitely a proper orange. But like I said, this is not as orange as I would have liked, but I've had this for 12 years, so I guess I got used to it. But the Bronco is not currently offering an orange that I like. The other thing I'll notice too about the fenders, I like the squared off look on both the Hummer and the Bronco, is what has drawn me to it. But the current standard fenders on the Bronco are these rounded off fenders. I like the more squared off look that you get like on the Everglades package. As you can see, they're more squared off here on the Hummer H3. I also would note the roof. I really like the hardtop roof on the Bronco, and obviously if you've seen other videos of this, you know that the doors come off, the roof panels come off. You get nothing like that on the Hummer. The doors don't come off, the roof doesn't come off. There is a roof rack available that you can get, roof rails you can get for the Bronco, which I would probably end up getting. As you can see, I had the roof rails on the Hummer H3 up there. So those are some of the differences here. We're gonna go ahead and move to the back. The Hummer H3 opens on this side, and so I'm not used to it yet, so I keep grabbing for that side, but the handle on the Bronco is over here. So you'll notice too, both vehicles have the spare tire mounted on the back, and on the Bronco, they seem to have a plastic bumper, and I'll show you in a minute, the Hummer actually has a steel bumper. So buttons here, push this, open up. This door swings out. I notice that this is pretty tight right now, so the door doesn't swing out very far by itself. Oh, see, there it goes. So I've been having some trouble with this, because if it only swings out this far when you first open it, if you try and open the glass, you can't. The rubber back here in the corner catches on the glass. So the door has to be swung open all the way in order to be able to lift the glass up. So you have a two-part thing. You swing the door and then you lift the glass up, and then you've got the back. And you can see here we've got rubber floor mats on top of a carpeted surface here, and there's tie-down hooks and such. So you have the rubber. So that's kind of the rear of the Bronco. I will note also, I believe we got LED lighting all around on the Bronco. On the Hummer H3, LEDs did not exist really in 2008, so I only have some LEDs, replacement headlights that I put in. The rest of them are all the standard light bulbs. Oh, and both of them have a tiny little 10-inch windshield wiper for the back. So this door swings out, and you can see the entire door is one piece, and you have the big 35-inch tire mounted on the back. It really wants to go when you start moving this. I got a lot of junk back there, but there's a lot of weight on here. This is more weight than was originally supposed to be on this tailgate, so it really swings, and then you get the whole tailgate as one piece. There's gonna be a lot more weight than you get as there's two different pieces there. So again, like I said, there's a lot of junk here. And I got a puppy looking at you guys. Here we have the rubberized floor, and instead of so that's where I keep it. But there was also a carpet that came with it, like a floor mat. So I take the carpet out of it, and then, like I said, throw a bunch of junk back here. So, and then you have the tie-down hooks. And this one, which is plastic on the top, but you have a steel bumper down here. So there might be some steel actually hiding behind that plastic bumper on the other one. But it's interesting. The Bronco has a steel bumper on the front, plastic on the back. The Hummer has a steel on the back and plastic on the front. I guess the thought being that this one protects you from a crash and somebody hitting you from the rear, whereas the one on the front protects you if you maybe hit something on the trail. I think that's the idea. So yeah, that's about it. We have, if you've never seen the Hummer, they store the tire bits in there for changing your tire in the door, which also adds to the weight of this door when it swings. So this thing, when you shut this with the 35-inch tire on there, it really gives it a a thump. So if somebody's in the car and they feel that door close, they really feel it. So again, like I said, we have the tiny little windshield wiper on there, and the toe hooks on the back, and again, the handles have been plasticked to black. They were originally chrome. So that's what we got here on the rear of the Bronco and the Hummer. All right, taking a look at the interior of the Bronco. First, we have these doors, and actually they're relatively light. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think if I was not removing them, I'd obviously prefer the heavier doors. But if I'm going to remove them, then obviously, you know, I want the lighter doors for removal. We have the door locks and the handles here. We have your locking mechanisms there. Everything else is located inside. Okay, we're going to start with the steering wheel. And I think the first thing you'll notice is this Bronco logo in the middle, which kind of makes me happy. I like the kicking horse. I think if I was a Ford Bronco customer, I think I'd appreciate having these little Bronco logos all over the place. The next thing you notice is the steering wheel controls, which on the Hummer H3 I have no controls whatsoever, and I used to have them on the Nissan Xterra that I owned before that, which I kind of got used to when I liked them, so I do miss them. So we'll start over here on the left. You get your settings for the adaptive cruise control and your volume there, and some of your safety settings for the lane keep assist. And then over on the right side, you have your controls to change your tracks, and then you have your buttons for changing the information on the digital cluster, and you have a phone button and a voice control button. So over here on the left stock, you've got, very similar to the Hummer actually, you have your windshield wipers and your turn signals and stuff on the left side. And of course you have a vent, and I already mentioned this handle. The digital cluster I covered in a previous video, so I'm not going to do too much of that with it here. We'll turn on the car in a minute though and show you that. And then let's look at some other buttons here. So first we got the off-road buttons up in this area. So we have, from left to right, we have your locking front differential, locking rear differential. This is the turn assist, which we did a demo of that in the Ford Expedition. Basically it helps you get around with some tight turns. This turns traction control off, and these are your hazard buttons here. There's a little area here, I guess you could put change in, store some change in there. I do like, well, this Bronco has a flat dashboard up here above the dashboard, which I actually have on the Hummer as well. I do like to put things up there, store things up there from time to time. So on this vehicle, we actually have this, which you can see that it says accessory ready, which I assume is a little mount. So if you wanted to put a camera there, a GoPro camera, or if you wanted to put a radar detector, you can do that. And the cool thing is they also put some power up here. So if you're going to put accessories up here, you have power right there. If I open this bad boy up, and you can see you've got the USB-A and the USB-C, so you can power up whatever devices you got and not have to run power down below, which I think that's great. They also have these little carve-outs here. I guess you could put other things in those spaces if you wanted to. The one is actually perfectly sized for a large iPhone, but I put my iPhone up there one time and it slid around, and when I was turning, plus it would get, they're pretty hot up there in the sun, so I don't think you'd really want to put your iPhone there very often. So down in the center, we have some other buttons here. We have our audio control buttons, and you can see we got a camera button, we have the auto start button, and we have the parking assists, and then we also have our temperature controls, dual climate zones, heated steering wheel, heated seats. We do not have cooled seats, however, and I would like to see some cooled seats on this vehicle. Definitely, for especially being down here in the summer, it gets pretty hot and humid down here when I live in Murrells Inlet, South Carolina, down on the beach. So let's go ahead, a couple more things here. So, and down here we have your wireless Qi charging, and then we also have both USB-A and USB-C plugs for all your needs. And you can see right now I got my wife's iPhone in there. Actually, I'm going to show you CarPlay. So let's start this up. See what happens when we start it up. There is an animation that comes up when you first open the door. I have a little bit of video of that. I'll show it to you on the screen at some point. But this is what the animation you get when you start the vehicle. And so you get your little Bronco animating over here, and of course we have lots of fingerprints on the screen. So taking a look at the digital dash, I did extensive look at this in my road trip video. If you look at that video, I have the link to it up in the upper right hand corner. But you can see we have an analog speedometer on the right, on the left, and then on the right we have the digital dash. There's a bunch of different settings and things you can do on that. So take a look at that video for more detail on that. Looking at the center screen though, this is the big screen, and what I really like about this is that you can hit the CarPlay button down here, and you'll see that CarPlay goes into its own little screen here. So as you go to Waze, for example, you got Waze on the left side, and then you still maintain these buttons down at the bottom. So you have audio, CarPlay, nav, apps. features. And then on this right side, you have another panel here. So what you can do then is you can have CarPlay on the left in that box, and you can see my CarPlay menu, and then on the right side, I can have navigation. So you can also change on the right side, you can change to other things like your audio, which we're not gonna do that right now for copyright reasons, but, or your zone lighting, or off-road status, your pitch and roll, and then your trip, which I like to keep on the right side. So this is what I do. I've been putting my directions with Waze, for example, which is going to be a little sluggish. Not too bad because I'm filming. So you have Waze there on the left, and then you have your trip information there on the right with your miles per gallon and how much time you've been on the road and everything. So, and then, like I said, you have the buttons at the bottom. So I kind of like that. It puts CarPlay in a square there instead of taking up the whole screen. I'm not sure if there is an option to give it the whole screen or not, but I kind of like it boxed like this anyways. So next, over here we've got your Bronco spelled out, and then you have your glove box, a little bit of storage. You have the handle over there. Like I said, I would prefer if there was a handle up top here, especially my wife would prefer that for getting in the vehicle. And like I said, when I go off-roading, sometimes I put the vehicle in a weird position and like to be able to climb back into the vehicle. So up above we have some additional buttons. So we have the information buttons here for your lighting, so your interior lighting, and then we have the indicators about the airbags, and of course we also have the microphone there for the Bluetooth audio. What I know is my favorite buttons in the entire vehicle are these auxiliary buttons here, and I like the fact that they're just these toggle switches that make a little bit of noise. They light up and change colors when you hit them. It kind of to me feels like you're driving an old military vehicle or plane or something or other. You click on those switches. So I assume the auxiliary switches are to allow you to hook up like additional lighting on the exterior, or if you have additional devices that are going to require power. So I have not looked, but I'm guessing there's some place underneath the hood with the battery that you can plug into your devices into the auxiliary power, and then those switches will just operate that. So it's nice that they have them there for you if you need to expand. I'd have to go look up and see a whole list of items that you could use those for. But it's interesting to me that, like I said, those are my favorite switches in the entire vehicle, and they don't do anything until I add an aftermarket part to this vehicle. All right, taking a look at the rear seats, you can see again we have the light doors and we have the door handles here, the locking mechanism. But your window switches are actually going to be here on the interior in the center console. So we've got the window controls there, and we have some power. So we have both USB A and C, and then you also have an inverter type powered that you can plug in a normal plug. And we have the rubber floor mats and another Bronco logo down there. I like the rubber floor mats. I like these seats. Pretty nice, and of course you have plenty of headroom up here, and you have these fold up like that, headrests. In the center of this folds down, and you have cup holders there. I know I've seen an aftermarket part that puts cup holders down there below you on the floor, probably a much more convenient spot. What I really like on the Bronco though is the folding seats in the rear, so you have to first make sure that you put the headrest down. So, there's a button here. So button there, headrest down, and then you pull this tab here to fold the seat down, and you'll see that the bottom seat moves out with it, slides, and the seats fold down pretty damn flat. So they go like that automatically by themselves. And I'll show you in the Hummer, it's a little bit more difficult in the Hummer. You have a two-piece operation, and it depends on where the front seat is, depending on whether you can fold that down properly or not. So both seats fold out like that. You have a 1/3, 2/3 type of configuration here, which is fairly common for folding seats in the rear. Okay, now we're going to look at the interior of the Hummer H3, and I will say that the H3 was probably fairly upmarket, more of a premium SUV for its time back in 2008, and so it actually had, pretty well equipped at the time, but now it'd be probably considered basic by most standards today. So obviously we have the power windows and door locks, and we have power mirrors here, and we have your light controls there, and your turn signal and your windshield wipers there. Of course, we have an analog dash, as you see here, and we have the four-wheel drive controls, these buttons here. I do like these buttons, except for sometimes I have a clip here that goes on the vent, and the phone hangs down there, and sometimes that hits the four-wheel drive buttons, so that upsets me a little bit. But I did put an aftermarket stereo in here. This is a Pioneer unit that is CarPlay capable, so I have full CarPlay in here. So with that, obviously I get the GPS and the Bluetooth and everything that this car originally did not have in it. Which I will note that, of course, nowadays you really can't upgrade the stereo system that are in most vehicles, because you don't really have these standard size holes anymore for upgradable head units. I really like these big rubberized controls here for the HVAC. And there down below you've got the rear windshield wiper, and then you just have two stereo there. So obviously no USB, no LED, none of that new stuff that we get these days. So I actually really like this steering wheel, this big thick steering wheel. It's actually a plastic rubber type thing, but I like that it's nice and thick to hold. A lot of vehicles these days I find the steering wheels are fairly thin, but of course I don't have any steering wheel controls whatsoever, so I do miss those. But I've been driving this now since 2010, so I've obviously gotten used to it. And I forgot to mention before that we have the cruise control options over there on the GM vehicle. So they're on that left stalk. Up on the mirror we have the OnStar buttons, and OnStar is actually not active. I don't have an OnStar subscription, but when I first got the vehicle I had it for 30 days or so. Yeah, so for the off-road buttons, this is a full-time four-wheel drive, so that left button is usually lit. But then you can do a four-wheel drive lock, four-wheel high lock in the center there, and then you have your four low, and then you have your locking rear differential, and then traction control. So that's basically the interior. I do like this little stainless steel that we have around the center console here, and then I do like the fact that we have this flat area on top. The dash, I use that for storage a lot when I'm driving different times. It's nice to have a flat dash that you can put things up on top of. This little bin here, this little storage bin on top, was an aftermarket add-on. It was very cheap and it's very useful. So if you have a Hummer, I definitely recommend that. And there you can see the interior. Obviously it's a little dirty. I said we live at the beach and we have a dog, and this is a 2008, so I don't really keep it all that pristine. There is the moonroof, and there is the puppy who just got finished running. So now he's trying to recover and breathe. So breathe, Buster. Let's go ahead and go for a ride in the Bronco. Obviously, I said earlier that the Hummer H3 I find underpowered, so there's much more power in this Bronco, and I definitely appreciate it, especially highway speeds. So far, you can always use more power, but I haven't found myself wanting that it needs or anything. I was a little bit surprised in how this drives. I don't know if surprise is the right word, but it drives a little bit differently than the Hummer. I think the Hummer is a little bit more put together, a little bit more planted, obviously I've been driving for 12 years, so it's a little beat up now, so it's hard to explain exactly, but it feels like a little bit smoother, a little bit more of a luxurious ride than this. This does remind me a lot more of the Wrangler than the Hummer does, which makes sense. It's competitive for the Wrangler, so it makes sense that it drives very similar to the Wrangler. Feels a little bit like a Wrangler, although I would say this is probably a little bit more refined than Wrangler is, so kind of in between the Hummer and the Wrangler in terms of refinement when it comes to driving. I do note that it feels a little bit skinny compared to my Hummer. I noticed that the overall measurements, the width is actually wider on this vehicle, but in the internal width I actually measured is about the same. But what's different is those flares that sit up in the front, those little things that you can hook the wires up to on the front of the vehicle if you wanted to, that stick up. I don't know what they call them, but they stick up, and they're the highest point on the front of the hood, and those actually, if you measure from wing to wing on those, are about 5 feet wide, whereas if you measure on my Hummer, the front fender flares that you can see sticking out in the front are the widest visual points you can see on that, and they're close to 6 feet apart. So that kind of gets you a feel that this vehicle feels skinnier when you're driving it, although the fenders do stick out, so you kind of have to account for that. It just feels skinnier, and it isn't actually any skinnier. So that's just something I noticed when I was driving it. Like I said, I think there's plenty of power on this vehicle. I drove over 700 miles, different highway conditions, different types of roads, and I felt that it was adequate for the job that I was doing. I did not get a chance to take this off-road, but I have driven my Hummer extensively off-road, so I wouldn't want to compare it on those things. I have a lot of noises that come from my H3 at this point in its life, since it's a 2008. resonate. You know, I get a lot of noises from this, but these are kind of noises that they built into the vehicle, not noises that the truck is making because it's old. So we do get a good amount of road noise coming from the tires, coming from this roof, just coming from the overall experience. I don't mind the road noise. I'm used to road noise, and if I'm buying this type of vehicle, I don't think road noise is really all that important, but some people might be interested in it. Obviously, this vehicle has a lot of the modern technology in it that I do not have in the H3. So when it comes to adaptive cruise control, for example, the lane keep assist, I believe it has the emergency braking and those types of features. We don't have anything like that. The H3 actually didn't even come with a backup camera. I've added that aftermarket. So this one obviously has higher quality cameras that are built in from the factory, and they're placed in the right position and give you a better image. And all the modern technology that you get these days with vehicles, for the most part, is in this vehicle. There's a couple things that are lacking that I'd like to have, but like I said, this is a 2021. I would expect, well, now they're selling 2023 Broncos, and I don't know. If I do get a Bronco, it probably wouldn't be till 2024. So I would hope that they keep, revising and adding new technology, and some of the nitpicky things that I might have about this vehicle now, I would hope that maybe it would get updated by time that I would get around to buying one. I find it fun to drive. I mean, it's still a vehicle that's relatively new to the market, and I think it's a desirable vehicle that a lot of people are interested in. So for that reason, it turns a lot of heads when you're driving the road. I've found that other Bronco owners are starting to wave to me. I know that's a Jeep thing, which is kind of funny. When I'm in the Hummer, I get Jeep people waving to me because they think it's a Jeep. So here when I'm in the Bronco, I get other Broncos waving to me. One guy in particular had a nice old classic Bronco, and he gave me a good salute. So obviously he's a Bronco warrior out there. So yeah, so I enjoy being part of a tribe, and so when you drive around in a vehicle like this, you feel a little bit instant brotherhood with other people that drive a Bronco, and instant envy from people that want to drive a Bronco. I talked a little bit about seat comfort in my road trip video. Overall, I'd say the seats are adequate. I wouldn't say one way or another. They're not uncomfortable, and they're not the most comfortable seats I've ever been in. So to me, that's acceptable. The only issue I'm really having is with this B pillar here, and it's basically just because of the way the seat is. I have the seat all the way back, and so it hides the seat a little bit behind that B pillar. So ingress and egress is a little bit affected by that. It's a little bit harder to get in and out, and then I feel sometimes that this is hitting my shoulder here. But the more I drive it, the more I get used to it. I'm actually interested in a two-door Bronco, and from what I understand, I think the doors are longer on the two-door Bronco, so I'll have to check that out and see. My guess is it won't be as much of a problem with the two-door Bronco. My major hang-up on the two-door, though, is that my dog really likes to sit in the back seat and put his head out the window. So yeah, I don't, the windows don't operate on the two-door. The side windows don't operate in the back, so the dog would not be able to put his head out the window. So well, I was telling a friend of mine about that problem. They said, well, you just put the dog in the front seat. And then I was like, well, that's where my wife sits. They said, oh, well, put the dog in the front seat and put your wife in the rear seat. And all problems are solved. I guess as long as the dog's happy, right? That's what they say, happy dog, happy life, right? So, yeah, so those are my thoughts on the Bronco, driving them on road. Like I said, I've not driven it off-road yet, but I look forward to being able to try that in the future. And let's go take a look at the Hummer H3 on the road. So I was going to take you for a ride here in the Hummer H3, but I actually have a couple different service issues here that are making some noise. Specifically, I have a heat shield that's currently rattling a lot. So at certain RPMs, it's really it's really bad. So to drive this thing around, trying to talk to the camera right now wouldn't really work too well for you. So I've already talked a little bit about some of the issues when I was driving the Bronco. I will say that the main thing to me is it's underpowered. The engine's this inline 5 cylinders was never really enough to power this vehicle. It's always been a problem. So it's the weight and size of this vehicle for an inline 5 engine just doesn't have the horsepower really that's going to work for you when you're merging on the highways and stuff like that. It's basically just something I've just tolerated over the years, but it's never really been enough. I would say also the gas mileage is another concern. It gets, I believe, around 15 or so when it was new. I have not checked it recently to see what kind of gas mileage it gets, but compared to vehicles today, it's pretty low. Although the Bronco wasn't really all that much higher. I think it was around 17. So although in my testing I did get higher, but it's just not rated for much higher. And the other thing, of course, is like I said, it's loud. It's old at this point, but I don't really worry about too much how loud the vehicle is, except for when I'm going to try to film it, I guess. I will say that Buster loves it. It's got a little cup holder that's in the middle of the seats back here, and right there. And you can see that I put his bowl in there, so when he's done running, he's got his water bowl there. He likes the height. I do as well, the height of the sides here and the smaller windows. It's perfect height for him to sit down and put his head right on the window and rest and see out the window. So yeah, I don't know, when we tested out the Bronco, it actually wasn't as good for Buster. So all right, there you go. That's about all we got on this Hummer H3 versus the Ford Bronco. Why don't you let Buster and I know what you think in the comments. Let us know what you think about this unlikely matchup here between the Bronco and the H3. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We want to thank you as always for watching, and Buster and I will see you down the road.